Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's baking blog. Today I'm going to make a chicken and vegetable pie. So mainly a chicken pie but with vegetables in, obviously, as the title would suggest. And this is going to have a crust on the bottom and a crust on the top of short crust pastry basically. Now the recipe is in 3 distinct stages. You have to make the pastry and chill it. Then I have to cook some chicken, and then having cooked the chicken, make a sauce with the vegetables so that I can combine the two, and then assemble the pie and bake it. So because of the different stages of preparation, I'm going to do the ingredients in 3 separate stages as well, and I'm going to start off with the ingredients for the short crust pastry. And for the pastry I have 350 grams, which is 2 1/3 cups based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. I have 170 grams, which is about 12 tablespoons of cold unsalted butter, which I've cut into small cubes. I have 120 milliliters, half a cup of creme fraiche. Though you could use a natural yogurt, or you could use sour cream if you want to, but I like creme fraiche. I'm going to use 1 medium egg, which would be large in the USA, and 6 grams of salt, which is 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm also going to use another egg, which I will beat later, and that's to brush over the top of the pastry once the pie's been assembled. So the first thing we need to do is to make this pastry. And to make the pastry, I'm going to put my flour and my salt into the processor bowl of my immersion blender. You can do this in a food processor. You can do it by hand, because in essence we're going to be rubbing the butter in. And you can do that by hand if you want to. So I'll put the flour in and the salt, and then I'm just going to pulse that a couple of times to get those combined. And that's good enough. And then I'm going to add in my butter. And that's nice and cold, and I'm going to pulse that 7 or 8 times. I want it, the butter, to be broken down into little chunks basically. And that's good enough. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my egg into my creme fraiche, and I'm going to whisk those together to get them fully combined. And that's good. And I'm going to put most of that, I'll hold back just a little bit, but I'll put most of it into the flour mixture, and I'm going to pulse that and to get that mixed through. And that's quite good now, but we still have to add the remainder of the wet ingredient. So I'll add that in. And I'm going to process that now until it clumps together into a shaggy dough. And I can see that clumping together, so I'm going to tip that out onto my work surface, and I'm going to just meld that into a dough. Basically, it's very moist, but as it chills in the fridge, the flour will hydrate and make a firm but easy to roll out dough, basically. So that's come together quite nicely. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide that into two fairly equal pieces. One will be for the top and one will be for the bottom. And then I'm going to take that and wrap it up. So I've flattened that into a disc and I'll wrap it in some plastic wrap. And do the same with the other piece. And I'm going to chill that in the fridge for at least an hour. Now you can leave it longer than an hour. You can do it the day before as well if you want to. But I'll chill it, and if it's too firm when it comes out of the fridge, I'll just leave it for a couple of minutes before I roll it out. But I'll come back and show you rolling that out later. But first of all, we need to get on and look at the ingredients for the pie filling, and we'll start off with the chicken. With my pastry dough chilling in the fridge, I'm now going to cook my chicken and get that ready to go into the filling. So I'll show you the ingredients for cooking the chicken. And as I mentioned, I'm using chicken thighs. You can use whatever meat you want, but I like chicken thighs. And I haven't cut off any of the fat or the sinew because I'm going to pull the chicken apart once it's cooked and cooled down, and I can discard any bits that I don't want at that stage. Now I may have more chicken than I need, but that's fine. And here I have 800 grams, which is about 28 ounces, 1 pound, 1 3/4 pounds basically, of chicken thighs. I have 1250 millilitres, which is 5 cups or thereabouts of chicken stock. You could just use water, but I'm using chicken stock. If you use water, you'll want to put some salt and pepper in, but the chicken stock has salt in, so I don't need that. I have 150 grams of onion, which is roughly chopped, and that's 1 small onion. I have 60 grams of leek, again 1 small leek which I have chopped, 60 grams of carrot, a small carrot chopped, and 1 stick of celery which is 80 grams, and I've chopped that, roughly chopped. I also have 1 bay leaf and 1 teaspoon, basically about 1 gram of dried thyme. And I'm going to put all of those into a saucepan. And I'll pour my stock over the top of everything else. And I just want enough stock to cover the chicken basically, and if it doesn't cover it you can add a little drop of water, but that's good enough. And I'm going to cook that, and I'm going to put it on the heat and bring it to the boil, and then I'm going to reduce the heat so that it's simmering, and I'm going to cover it with a lid and cook it until the chicken is cooked completely. And for me that means it's cooked to between 78 and 80 degrees Celsius, which is 170, 175 Fahrenheit. You may have another method of checking the temperature or checking that it's cooked by piercing it and seeing if the juices run clear, but I prefer to do it by temperature. So once that has happened, I'm going to take it off and I'm going to strain it. So you don't need to watch this boiling basically, because that's all it's going to do, boil and simmer, but I'll come back once it has reached the right temperature. So I cooked my chicken in the stock and the vegetables, simmering it until it reached 80 degrees Celsius. In fact, it actually went up in some pieces to about 86, 87 degrees, which is fine, but that tells me the chicken is cooked. So what I did is I strained the liquid into a bowl, and I've taken the chicken out of the vegetables and put those into a bowl. Now the vegetables you can discard. We're going to use different or the same sort of vegetables, but chop them again, chop fresh ones for the filling. But I'm actually going to keep these vegetables because I'm going to use those in a soup for myself later on. So basically the stock, I'm going to use some of that to make our filling. The remainder I will freeze, and the chicken, once it's cool enough to handle, I'm going to pull it apart into pieces, and then we're ready to make our filling with vegetables and the chicken to be added into it, ready to go into the pie. So my chicken has cooled down and it's cool enough to handle, so I've torn it apart and put it into a bowl, and I'm going to cover that and put that in the fridge because it's now cool enough to go in the fridge, and I'm going to chill that while I assemble the ingredients to make the sauce for the filling, and once I've assembled them I'll come back and we'll work on those. So to make the sauce with the vegetables for the filling, I have all these ingredients here, and I'll go through them. I have 56 grams, which is 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I have 200 grams, which is 7 ounces of onion, which I have chopped. I have 200 grams, 7 ounces of mushrooms, which I've chopped quite large. I have 100 grams, 3.5 ounces of carrot, chopped. 84 grams, 3 ounces of celery, chopped. I have 100 grams, 3.5 ounces of frozen peas, and I'm going to put those back into the freezer until I need them shortly. Then I have 120 millilitres, half a cup of milk, 53 grams, a third of a cup plus 1 tablespoon of plain flour, 360 millilitres, 1.5 cups of chicken stock. That's from the chicken that we cooked earlier. And I have 3/4 of a cup, which is 180 millilitres of white wine. Now if you don't want to use the wine, you can just add another 3/4 of a cup of chicken stock. That will be fine. I have 1 gram, half a teaspoon of black pepper, 3 grams, half a teaspoon of salt, and about half a gram, half a teaspoon of dry thyme. So that's all the ingredients, and we now need to go on to make our sauce. And to make the vegetable sauce, I'm going to use 2 pans. I'm going to fry the mushrooms separately until they've released their liquid. Then they will be ready to add in to the sauce. But in the main pan I have my butter, which I'm going to just heat until it's melted. And so with the butter melted, I'm going to put my onions, carrots and celery into the pan, and I'm going to cook those until they've softened, and that's going to take 7 or 8 minutes, just on a gentle heat. I don't want them to brown, I just want them to soften. And I'll add in at this stage the salt and the pepper, and the thyme. I'll let those cook, and as they're cooking I'm going to add my mushrooms into the other pan, and I'm going to cook those. They will reduce down, they will release their liquid, and then as that liquid is evaporated and reabsorbed, they will be ready to set aside and put into the filling later. And as you can see, the mushrooms are releasing their juices. So my mushrooms have cooked down, and I've turned those the heat off those, and the carrot, celery and onion have softened. So I'm going to pour in my flour, and I'm going to stir that around and cook it for about a minute so that the flour all gets cooked. This is the thickening agent for the pie filling. So that's good. So I'm going to add in my wine, and I'm going to cook that just a little bit, and it will start to thicken up the sauce. But I'm going to cook that just to let the alcohol evaporate. And then I'm going to add in my milk and my stock. And I'm then going to cook this until it thickens. Cook it gently, but it will take maybe 10 minutes or so to thicken to a nice thick consistency. And at this stage I can also add in my mushrooms. So that's beginning to boil now. I'll turn it down a little bit, and I'm going to cook that until it thickens nicely. So I have cooked my sauce for about 8 minutes actually, and it's very, very thick now, which is nice. So I'm going to turn the heat off, and I'm going to add in my frozen peas. And that will help to reduce the temperature of the sauce. But I want that to cool down because we cannot put that into a pie while it's hot. So I'm going to transfer that to a bowl and allow it to cool down, and as it cools down I'm going to roll out my pastry. So I've floured my work surface and I'm going to roll out each piece of my dough to about 12 inches in diameter. And as I said, if your dough is very firm, you can take it out of the fridge and leave it for a few minutes just to soften slightly. And I think that's probably about good enough, so I'm going to roll that up onto my rolling pin and I'm going to lower that into my pan, and being careful not to stretch it as I lower it down. Like that. And I'm just going to trim off a little bit of the excess. And where that I can see that's a little bit thin just there, I'm going to put some of the dough behind it and just press that in like that. And that's going to go into the fridge to chill. And I will also roll out the other piece to the same size, and I will chill that on some parchment paper ready for going on the top. But first of all I need to let my filling cool down just a little bit more. So I'll come back when the filling has cooled down and we're ready to fill the pie and bake it. And at that time I'll have my oven preheating to 230 Celsius, 210 Celsius with a fan, 450 Fahrenheit, and that will be ready to take the first part of the bake, and we'll reduce the temperature partway through baking. But I'll come back when I'm ready to assemble the pie. My oven is preheating now, and so I'm going to stir my chicken into the rest of the filling. Just like that, and then I'm going to put that into my pie case. I'm going to pile it up because I can use all of it, I think. I'll just spread that out. like that. And then I'll take my other piece of pastry, which is still in the fridge, and I'm going to pick that up and place it over the top like that. I'm just going to trim that off a little bit. Like that, and then I'm going to tuck that top crust into the side of the bottom crust. So I'll just tuck it under. Like that, and then I'm going to crimp it basically, and you can do it any way you want. Like that, and I'm going to brush it with egg, but before I brush it with egg I'm going to cut the centre like that. That's going to, with a cross like that, that's going to allow the steam to escape as it bakes. So I've beaten the egg which I referred to in the ingredients, and I'm going to brush that over the top of the pastry. And that's good like that. So then I'm going to put that onto a baking tray, and I'm going to put it into the oven, and I'm going to bake it for 20 minutes at the high temperature, and then I'm going to reduce the temperature to 190 degrees Celsius, 170 Celsius with a fan, 375 Fahrenheit, and I'm going to bake it for a further 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, but 35 minutes, until it's absolutely piping hot and the underside of the pastry case has had a chance to cook through and the top crust is nice and brown. And at that time I'll take it out of the oven and I will put it onto a wire rack in the pie dish, and I will leave it for at least 40 minutes before I cut into it, but I'll come back and show you what it looks like once it's rested for 40 minutes. I baked my chicken and vegetable pie for 20 minutes at the original temperature. Then I reduced it, as I mentioned, and baked it for a further 35 minutes. I took it out of the oven and I put it onto a wire rack in its pie dish, and I left it to cool down. I've actually cut it sooner than I wanted to because I'm taking the rest round to my niece for her dinner. But it looks very, very good, I have to say. So this is what it looks like. If I'd left it for another 20 minutes, it would have firmed up inside just that little bit, but it looks perfectly good. And I'll have a taste of the piece that I've cut out. Still very hot, very, very tasty. The pastry is lovely, and I've tasted the bottom of the pastry and that's cooked perfectly as well. And then the sauce is rich, and you get the little flavour of the thyme and the white wine. The whole pie is simply delicious, I have to say. Now it does take some time, but if you organise, you can do things in advance. You can cook your chicken in advance and put it in the fridge. You can even buy shop bought cooked chicken and use that if you want to. You can make the pastry in advance, and so then on the day all you have to do is to make the sauce with the vegetables, add the chicken into it, roll the pastry out, and Bob's your uncle, almost. So anyway, that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there'll be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.